Triumph and Tragedy, The Life of Napoleon Bonaparte I by Brianna Trimble, Jacob Wayman, and Chris Shewitt.
Voices by Jacob, Brianna, and Chris.
This is a portrait of Napoleon portrayed as an emperor.
Napoleon Bonaparte was born August 15, 1769, on the small rocky island of Corsica. At the time Napoleon was born, his father fought against the French. When Napoleon was 10, he was accepted on a scholarship to a military academy in Paris, France. When he went to the school, he was teased about his height, but he stayed strong and gave them a whip of grape shot. At the age of 16, he became second lieutenant in the French army.
As a young adult, Napoleon enrolled in the French army and became one of the greatest military leaders of all time. When he was in the army, he soon rose to power very quickly and became the Emperor of the French at the age of 35. Napoleon once quoted, "A throne is only a bench covered with velvet."
Death is nothing but to live defeated, and inglorious is to die daily.
In 1796, Napoleon became the commander of the French army in Italy. 2 years later, Napoleon conquered the Ottoman-ruled area of Egypt in an attempt to strike the British forces of India. At the time Napoleon was conquering Italy, Italy had been an independent country for over 1,000 years. After Italy, Napoleon went on to conquer Egypt. He did this because of its great location and it was easy to conquer.
From the heights of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down on us. Victory belongs to the most persevering, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Today we're going to talk to Mr. Patrick about Napoleon and some of his battles. Mr. Patrick, why was Austerlitz Napoleon's greatest victory?
I think a lot of historians believe that Austerlitz was Napoleon's greatest victory because he took an inferior force of men and was able to trick the Russians and the Austrians in the battle. He intentionally left his flanks, his right flank and his left flank, weak so that they would attack him on the edges, and then once they attacked him on the edges, he drove right through the center and was able to defeat the Russians and the Austrians and make such a great name for himself as a military genius, and it truly does stand as one of his greatest victories.
Thank you.
This is the invasion of Russia, which took place in 1812. Mr. Patrick, since you know so much about Napoleon, why was the invasion of Russia so important to his downfall, and why did he invade Russia in the first place?
The invasion of Russia, why would you want to invade Russia from France in the first place? It was this mistake in history that was first acted upon by Napoleon and then later repeated by Hitler. You just don't invade Russia and try to take such an empire over. It's too far away. The Russian winters are too cold. But Napoleon was being Napoleon. He wanted to dominate all of Europe, and his continental system was based on this domination of trade, and the Russians weren't going to go along with this continental system, and so Napoleon decided he was going to invade, and so he took his grand army of 500,000 men, and they were really kind of ill-equipped to invade Russia and last for an entire winter. And so they were able to get to the gates of Moscow, but they were stopped there, and eventually the Grand Army fell apart, and Napoleon was defeated, and out of the 500,000 troops that he took, which is 500,000 troops, only 20,000 of them made it back to France. And of course Napoleon deserted his troops along the way because there was an uprising in Paris and he had to get back. And so this didn't really have good consequences for him as a leader when you have over 480,000 of your men, French men, that die in this invasion. People started to question Napoleon at that point.
Thank you. When Napoleon left for anything related to military, he would always write letters back to his wife Josephine and his children. Some letters he told her that he loved her in one sentence, but sometimes in the next he would talk about how much he hated her. But even when he was away, he would still be in contact with his wife and family.
Mr. Patrick, how did Napoleon fall from power?
Napoleon, after the debacle in Russia, the European nations had had enough of Napoleon, and so they brought a coalition together to defeat him. And his generals were tired of fighting, and so he was forced into exile on this island of Elba in the Mediterranean. But Louis XVIII was not a very popular king in France, and so Napoleon escaped Elba, and he came back to France, and soon was able to create a new army. And this alarmed all of the other European nations, the Prussians and the Austrians and the Russians and the English. And so they brought their forces together again, and there was one final battle in 1815 in Belgium near the village of Waterloo, and orchestrated by the Duke of Wellington. The Duke of Wellington crushed Napoleon and his troops, and that led to the ultimate downfall of Napoleon. Napoleon was then exiled to a very cold island in the Atlantic Ocean called St. Helena, and he lived there for, I believe, 6 years until he died under mysterious circumstances. Was it a stomach ailment? Did he die of arsenic poisoning? It's one of those unsolved mysteries that historians will follow for years to come.
Thank you. When Napoleon was exiled to Elba, it was a race for time to get off the island to save the citizens of France from Louis XVIII, who had become a very unpopular ruler. This is the island in the Mediterranean where Napoleon was first exiled to.
The Battle of Waterloo took place in 1815 near the border of Belgium. This battle included Napoleon's army, the British, Germans, Belgians, Dutch, and the Prussians. I tell you, Wellington is a bad general. The English are bad soldiers. We will settle this matter by lunchtime.
As a result, Napoleon has not yet since been forgotten in France. Since his death, he's had several monuments built in remembrance of France's greatest military leader. Just to name a few of the monuments that were made for him is the Arc of Triumph in Les Invalides, which glorifies the sarcophagus in which Napoleon lies in. Napoleon's effect on France remains strong, and if it wasn't for Napoleon, then France wouldn't be the way that it is today. To this day, Napoleon Bonaparte I still remains universally one of the greatest military leaders of all time. To my mind, the only immortality is the memory we leave behind in the minds of men. Everything on earth is soon forgotten, except for the opinion we leave imprinted on history, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte died on May 5, 1821 from advanced stomach cancer on the remote island of St. Helena. He lived to be 52 years old. The last words that Napoleon Bonaparte ever said was Tête d'armée, which means head of army in French. If you want a thing done well, do it yourself. Napoleon Bonaparte.
If you wish to be a success in the world, promise everything, deliver nothing.
Men are moved by two levers only, fear and self-interest. The best way to keep one's word is not to give it.
Power is my mistress. I work too hard at her conquest to allow anyone to take her away from me. You must not fight too often with one enemy, or you will teach him all your art of war.
It is the cause, not death, that makes the martyr. To this day, still hundreds of years after Napoleon's death, there is still controversy over whether Napoleon was poisoned or murdered. This mystery still remains unsolved and perplexes historians today.